Have you ever faced a situation where there seemed to be no way out? Where every path led to a dead end, and all that remained was uncertainty? Today, I'm going to tell you the story of a man who faced this reality. And in his darkest moment, he made a decision that would change his life forever. Miguel was a simple man, a dedicated farmer who lived in a small village with his wife, Clara, and their two children, Samuel and Elisa. Since childhood, he had learned from his father that the land only bears fruit when nurtured with patience and love. That's why, every morning, he would go out to the fields, plow the soil, and thank God for each new harvest. He wasn't a wealthy man, but his faith was unshakable. Every day, before meals, he would gather his family and pray with gratitude, even when the harvests were not as plentiful. His most treasured possession was Solano, a strong and loyal horse that had always been by his side, helping with planting and harvesting. Solano wasn't just a working animal, he was part of the family. But Miguel had no idea that his faith was about to be tested in a way he never imagined. It all began with an unexpected drought. At first, Miguel believed the rains would return soon, just as they always had. But as the days passed, the scorching sun showed no mercy. The leaves began to wither, the streams dried up, and the earth cracked with thirst. The harvest, once a source of joy, started disappearing before his eyes. What had once been a life of hard work and reward was now turning into a nightmare. The corn, beans, and wheat withered before they could mature. The food supplies dwindled, and each meal became smaller than the last. Clara tried to stay calm, serving smaller portions to the children and rationing the water. But behind her tired eyes, Miguel could see the growing fear. It was on a silent night, while everyone slept, that Miguel fully grasped the gravity of the situation. Sitting at the table, holding a piece of dry bread in his hands, he realized that his family was on the brink of starvation. The weight of responsibility bore down on his shoulders like never before. He closed his eyes and prayed. "Lord, I have always trusted you. I have always been grateful for what I have. But now I am lost. What should I do?" The silence of the night was his only answer. And that was when Miguel understood, if he wanted to save his family, he would have to make a difficult decision. But he had no idea that this decision would lead him to the greatest test of faith in his life. Morning arrived with an unforgiving sun. The sky was clear, with no sign of clouds, and the heat began spreading across the dry land. Miguel stepped outside and walked toward the fields. What he saw made his heart sink. The plants he had nurtured with such care were wilted, brittle, some already lifeless. The wind stirred up small clouds of dust where there had once been green leaves and promising fruit. He knelt down and ran his hand over the soil, hoping to feel some moisture, but all he found was hard, parched earth. A heavy sigh filled his lungs. Clara stood in the doorway, watching him in silence. Even from a distance, her eyes revealed her worry. As he approached, she hesitated before speaking. "We're out of wheat, Miguel. The flour ran out yesterday." A tight knot formed in his throat. He knew this moment would come, but he wasn't ready to hear it out loud. He glanced inside the house and saw his children sitting on the floor, playing, unaware that soon there would be nothing left to eat. "Do we still have water?" he asked. Clara nodded but looked away. "Not much. If the drought continues, I don't know for how long." The weight of reality was crushing. Miguel had always been a man of faith, but now he felt lost. For years, he had worked tirelessly to provide for his family, trusting that God would always provide. But as he looked at his starving children and the anxious gaze of his wife, doubt began to creep in. In the village, other families faced the same struggle. Some had already abandoned their land in search of hope elsewhere. Others tried to survive by selling whatever they had left. Miguel knew that if he wanted to buy his family a few more days of food, he would have to make a difficult choice. He turned his eyes toward the stable, where Solano, his horse, rested in the shade. For years, that animal had been his loyal companion, helping in the fields, pulling the cart, carrying heavy loads when needed. But now, Miguel saw no other way. If he sold Solano, he could buy enough food to last a few more days. Maybe just long enough for the rain to return before it was too late. But something inside him resisted the thought. Solano wasn't just a horse. He was family. The sun climbed higher in the sky, intensifying the heat. Miguel wiped the sweat from his brow and closed his eyes for a moment. He had to be strong. That night, while everyone slept, he quietly got up and stepped outside toward the stable. He approached Solano and ran his hand through the horse's mane. The animal lifted his head, looking at him calmly, as if he understood the weight of the decision. "Forgive me, my friend," Miguel whispered. The next morning, with a heavy heart, he made his choice. He grabbed a rope, gently tied it around Solano's neck, and set off toward the village market. Now, all that remained was to find out if he was making the right decision. The road to the village felt longer than usual. Miguel walked in silence, holding the rope that guided Solano. The horse followed obediently, without resistance, as if accepting his fate. The sun scorched his skin, and the dry wind kicked up dust around him. Each step felt heavier. His thoughts tangled between the need to provide for his family and the pain of letting go of the only possession he had left. When he reached the market, the place was already bustling. Men sold grain, women bargained for fruit, and the scent of freshly baked bread lingered in the air. Miguel's stomach twisted. He hadn't had a full meal in days. He made his way to the area where cattle traders dealt in horses and oxen. A burly man with a shrewd gaze and worn-out clothes eyed Solano up and down, then frowned. "Strong horse, but he's not young anymore," the man muttered, scratching his beard. "I can offer you a few silver coins." Miguel felt a tightness in his chest. He had hoped for more, but he knew he wasn't in a position to negotiate. The money would buy flour, beans, and maybe even a little meat for his children. He looked at Solano, who gazed back at him with those same calm, loyal eyes. The trader crossed his arms. "So, do we have a deal or not?" Miguel opened his mouth to accept the offer, but something inside him made him hesitate. A strange feeling gripped his chest, like a warning. His heartbeat quickened. The trader sighed impatiently. "I don't have all day, friend." Miguel closed his eyes for a moment. Everything inside him told him selling Solano was the right thing to do. It was the obvious solution. But at the same time, a quiet voice deep within whispered that this wasn't the path he was meant to take. He took a deep breath and, to the trader's surprise, stepped back. "I'm sorry," Miguel said, pulling Solano's rope. "I can't do this." The trader raised his eyebrows and let out a dry laugh. "You're going to regret this, friend." But Miguel didn't answer. He simply turned away from the market, feeling the curious stares of those around him. Even he couldn't explain why he had walked away. He only knew that something had stopped him. Now, he was heading home with no money, no food, and no plan. But deep down, he felt that his test was far from over. The road back home felt even longer than before. Miguel walked slowly, weighed down by the decision he had made. His empty stomach and the worry for his family made him doubt himself. Had he made a mistake? Solano walked beside him at an unhurried pace, as if nothing had changed. But for Miguel, everything was different. As he neared the village, he veered off the path to his house and headed in another direction. Instead of returning to Clara and the children empty-handed, he decided to go to the village church. When he arrived, the temple was empty. The dim light of the candles flickered on the altar, and the silence was profound. Miguel walked to the front and fell to his knees. Holding Solano's rope tightly, he lowered his head and took a deep breath. "Lord, I don't know what to do," his voice came out shaky, barely above a whisper. "My family is hungry. My children cry for bread. I tried to find a way, I tried to do what seemed right, but something inside me stopped me." His eyes filled with tears, but he continued. "I have always worked hard. I have always trusted in your provision. But now I see no way forward. The little I have, I leave here before you." With trembling hands, he untied the rope from around Solano's neck and placed it on the altar. The horse remained still, making no attempt to run. He simply looked at Miguel with calm eyes, as if he understood what was happening. For a few moments, Miguel stayed there, his head bowed, waiting for an answer. But all he heard was silence. He swallowed hard and slowly rose to his feet. Casting one last glance at Solano, he turned and walked out of the church. As he stepped through the doors, a deep emptiness settled in his chest. Now, he had nothing left. The only thing he still had was faith. Miguel walked home feeling a coldness that didn't come from the wind but from deep inside him. For the first time, he didn't know how he would face his wife and children. He had no money, no food, and now, not even Solano was with him. When he arrived, Clara was already waiting at the door. Her eyes widened in shock as she saw him return empty-handed. "Miguel, where's Solano?" He stopped, took a deep breath, and lowered his head before answering. "I gave him to God." The silence that followed was suffocating. Clara blinked a few times, trying to make sense of what he had just said. "What do you mean?" "I left him at the church. I prayed, asked God for a way out, and I gave him the little we had left." Clara covered her mouth with her hands, as if holding back a sob. Then, she shook her head in disbelief. "You gave him away? Miguel, we have nothing left. How could you do this? How could you abandon the only thing that could have helped us?" The pain in her voice cut through Miguel like a blade. But he had no answer. Samuel and Elisa stepped outside and looked at their parents curiously. They didn't fully understand what was happening, but they knew something was wrong. Clara took a deep breath, trying to hold back her tears. "What will we tell them when they ask for food? What are we going to do tomorrow?" Miguel didn't reply. He simply lowered his head, feeling the weight of his decision. That night, no one ate dinner. The silence in the house was as heavy as the darkness outside. Miguel lay on the floor beside his children and stared at the ceiling. Never in his life had he felt such uncertainty. "Lord, why?" he murmured, but there was no answer. He closed his eyes and tried to sleep. But deep in his heart, his faith was hanging by a thread. Dawn arrived slowly, carrying an unsettling silence. Miguel had barely slept. The weight of uncertainty gnawed at him from the inside. Sitting at his doorstep, he gazed at the barren landscape around him. The weak wind stirred up dust over the dry ground. Then, he heard a distant sound. At first, he thought it was just the wind, but soon he realized it was something else. A rhythmic, steady noise. Wheels rolling over the earth. A carriage stopped in front of his house. Miguel stood up slowly, his heart pounding. A tall man stepped down from the vehicle, dressed in fine yet simple clothes. His name was Dom Ramiro, the owner of the largest lands in the region. He observed Miguel for a moment before speaking. "Miguel, I heard about what you did yesterday." The farmer frowned, confused. "You heard?" "Yes," Dom Ramiro continued. "I heard that you gave your horse to God. That you let go of the little you had, without any guarantee of return." Miguel felt a tight knot in his throat. He didn't know if this was meant as a judgment or just an observation. But then, the man gave a slight smile and spoke the words that would change his fate. "I need a man like you. I want you to manage my lands." Time seemed to stand still. Miguel blinked, stunned. "But, why me?" Dom Ramiro crossed his arms and answered with conviction. "Because if you are willing to give everything to God, I know you will do your work with that same dedication." Miguel's heart pounded. He turned to Clara, who stood in the doorway, her eyes wide with disbelief. For a brief moment, everything made sense. God had not abandoned him. Miguel's heart pounded in his chest. The wealthiest man in the village stood before him, offering not just a job, but a new chance for his family. Clara stepped forward slowly, still struggling to believe what she was hearing. "Are you serious?" she asked, her voice carrying both doubt and hope. Dom Ramiro nodded. "You can start tomorrow. Your wages will be fair, and your family will never have to go hungry again." Miguel closed his eyes for a moment, letting himself absorb the weight of that moment. Then, he looked at Clara and saw the relief in her eyes, mixed with hesitation. "Miguel, what if it's just an empty promise?" she whispered. He took her hands in his and answered with quiet conviction. "I don't know, Clara. But I know this is what God has placed before us. We can't give up now." She sighed, still uncertain, but deep in her heart, she wanted to believe. The next morning, Miguel set out for Dom Ramiro's estate. Never in his life had he worked on such fertile land, with lush fields and thriving crops. The work wouldn't be easy, but he gave it the same dedication with which he had always cared for his own land. Days turned into weeks, and for the first time in a long while, his family had food on the table every single day. Clara began to regain the peace she had lost, and his children found their smiles again. But deep in Miguel's heart, one question still lingered. Why had God made him go through all of this? The answer came in a way he never could have imagined. One day, while buying supplies at the village market, his eyes locked onto something that made him freeze in place. His chest tightened, and his breath caught. Right in front of him, tied to a wooden post, stood Solano. His horse. It was impossible. Slowly, Miguel stepped forward, a whirlwind of emotions surging inside him. It was him. The same calm eyes, the familiar marking on his back. The very same Solano he had given to God. He turned to the merchant standing nearby. "Sir, where did this horse come from?" The man barely spared him a glance. "Picked him up from the village church. Someone donated him, but they couldn't keep him, so I bought him." A chill ran through Miguel's body. His heart pounded, and tears burned at the corners of his eyes. Not only had God provided for him, but now, he was returning what Miguel had surrendered. And the best part? This time, Miguel had enough money to buy Solano back, without sacrificing his family's well-being. With a trembling voice, he placed the coins in the merchant's hand. "I want him back." The man took the money and untied the rope. Solano stepped toward Miguel, and, as if nothing had changed, the horse followed him willingly. At that moment, Miguel understood. Sometimes, God asks us to let go of something, not because He wants to take it away, but because He wants to teach us to trust. And when we trust, He gives it back, multiplied. Miguel walked home with Solano by his side. But this time, there was no pain in his chest, no doubt in his mind. Every step was filled with gratitude, for now, he understood what once seemed meaningless. When he reached his house, Clara was already waiting at the door. The moment she saw Solano, her hands flew to her mouth in shock. "Miguel, how is this possible?" The children ran outside, excitement lighting up their faces. Samuel pointed at the horse, laughing. "Daddy, Solano is back." Miguel stopped in front of them and smiled with quiet certainty. "God has returned to us what we gave to him." Clara stared at him, speechless. For months, she had doubted her husband's decision, fearing it had all been for nothing. But now, seeing Solano standing there, strong and healthy, she could no longer deny it. She stepped forward and touched Miguel's arm, her eyes glistening with tears. "I don't understand, why did we have to go through all of this?" Miguel knelt down, gathering Samuel and Elisa in his arms. He looked at Clara with warmth and said, "Because sometimes, God asks us to let go, not to punish us, but to teach us to trust." Clara felt a lump form in her throat. And now? What happens next? Miguel took a deep breath and looked up at the sky. Now, we live knowing that God never abandons us. That night, for the first time in a long while, the family sat around the table not just with food on their plates, but with peace in their hearts. Curious, Samuel looked at his father and asked, "But Daddy, why did God take Solano away and then give him back?" Miguel smiled and playfully ruffled his son's hair. "Because sometimes, He needs us to truly learn how to trust Him." Silence filled the room, but this time, it wasn't the silence of fear, it was the silence of reflection. Outside, the wind blew softly. And inside Miguel's heart, there were no more doubts. Now, he knew. True faith isn't trusting only when things are going well. It's trusting even when it feels like everything is lost. Sometimes, life puts us through challenges that seem impossible to overcome. We wonder why God allows us to go through hardships, not realizing that every test is a path to something greater. What about you? Have you ever had to let go of something without knowing if you'd ever get it back? How was your experience? Share your story in the comments. If this message touched your heart, like this post and send it to someone who needs to hear it today. And don't forget to subscribe for more inspiring stories that might just change the way you see life. May God bless you, and see you in the next video.